back in 5G Techritory Omega stage. We will soon start our next panel discussion. Few reminders about your activity. So if you haven't done this yet, please fill your profile and indicate your interest so that the system can match you with other people from your industries and your fields of activity. By the way, I have some numbers. Today, so far, we have more than 1,000 unique registered users and participants of this forum. Currently, on average, there are 600 people watching us, and there have been already more than 500 chats on different topics. So that's a wonderful thing. And by the way, judging by the activity that you perform in the system gives you points. And later, the leaders, 3 lucky people, will get prizes, actually physical things shipped from Latvia. 5G promises us better connectivity, huge bandwidth, and data transmission. So the question is, how can we ensure that we reap all the benefits from this opportunity? Joining us today is Kasper, who would be the host of this panel discussion. He is representing the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management in the Netherlands. So, Kasper de Jonge, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to all participants online, and especially our distinguished guests in this panel. Before I introduce them, a very heartfelt thank you for the organization of this forum, and I'm sure that the current pandemic circumstances have not made your work any easier, but you did a great job, and it's really appreciated. To introduce our guests for this discussion, I would like to start off with Dimitri Konyagin, Enterprise Business Leader with NVIDIA, a technology provider. Artūrs Lindenbergs, Latvia Mobile Telephone Innovation Lead, Head of Mobile Innovations. Ilkka Kotilainen, Special Advisor within the Finnish Transport and Communications Agency, Traficom. And last but certainly not least, Peter Stuckman, Head of the Unit Future Connectivity Systems with DG Connect from the European Union, European Commission. Guys, a very warm welcome. We have a very substantive topic to handle in 45 minutes. And I would like to hear your views on where we will be in 2025, so in 5 years, with the actual deployment on the streets with regular citizens and organizations in 5G-enabled products, services, processes. In short, what will be new, extra, different from our current situation? Dimitri, could I ask your view to start this off? And it might be as well as your ambition as your expectation or prognosis, so feel free.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kasper, and hello, everyone. So I believe it's pretty hard to exactly predict what's going to happen in 5 years from now, especially considering the way we are doing this conference today. But anyway, I think actually the combination of the 2 really revolutionary things and technologies like 5G and artificial intelligence will actually change a lot of things around us. So I would probably focus on just 4. So first of all, if we talk about the pure consumer type of things, I believe the major shift is going to happen in terms of entertainment and gaming, because basically 5G will make things like cloud gaming is available for almost everybody, and it will basically extend the kind of entertainment capabilities for everyone. So probably the second thing which will expected to affect even more people is things related to the autonomous mobility and self-driving things. So 5G is going to be essential part of this transportational substantial change. And once again, 5G is absolutely necessary part. Though probably autonomous vehicles won't need to be fully connected all the time during the operation, but it definitely would need to have a great connectivity in order to constantly update the algorithms and things related to the self-driving stuff. Probably the second thing, which is once again is touching the masses of people, is going to be automation of retail and warehouse management, where the modern warehouse will become basically fully automated robotic factory. And 5G is obviously essential in order to get a constant connectivity and manage all the independent robotics and orchestrate all of them. And probably the last one in terms of my list, but probably not the, probably in terms of importance much higher, it's obviously things related to the public security. So when there are going to be lots of smart cameras which would help different services to react on something, bad things happening, to prevent them, or if they unfortunately happen, to react much quicker and in much more intelligent way. So I would probably just highlight these four.
A clear vision. If I may go to you, Artūrs, being from Latvia Mobile Telephone, that would promise a paradise for you as a telecommunications provider.
Yes, actually, to give the clear answer on after 5 years, what will happen, I just take my magic crystal ball, but unfortunately I don't have it. But I will give my insight from telco point of view. For sure, we will have already deployed 5G and all these connectivity stuff, but the main question is how these services based on this connectivity will be used by consumers and businesses. So we know that 5G is more like in industrial internet, industrial services, what we can deploy in this network. Because 4G is good enough to develop something, to deploy some of these services. We already use some car sharing services, mobility as a service, and so on. But actually 4G is best effort, and we can't guarantee on 100% that these services are working 24/7. So I believe that after these 5 years, we will have totally different user experience, how we are moving from point A to point B. And we already saw that in this year, in pandemic, people are changing really their habits. They are not using, less using the public transport. They're using again cars and so on. But after 5 years, maybe some 50% of us won't own these cars. We will use these simple services, what we can build on 5G. So from my point of view, I believe that we will have already deployed 5G. We will have common understanding between all European countries what it really means safe mobility, because it's really important how we develop these services, not only country by country, but in whole Europe. So these connected vehicles and all the other devices can move safely from Latvia to Netherlands, for example. So, and I believe that most of these ideas, what we are now testing, some car platunings and other services, and most of this groundwork already will be deployed and will be in reality.
Thank you, Artūrs. Going to Peter, as Artūrs stressed, it will not only be in one country, but it needs to be, and it probably will be, European-wide. So it's logical to address that European-wide perspective. How do you see that?
Yes, thanks, Kaspar. Indeed, European perspective is important here because we're talking about digital ecosystems, about scale, so we need critical mass. So we see actually already, hopefully, developments until 2025 in 3 mega trends, I would say. One is, of course, connected automated mobility, so higher levels of automation, higher safety, higher efficiency, and all kinds of connected services in cars. Electrification, which is, of course, maybe not directly connected or not so obvious as a connection to connectivity, but of course also enabled by digital transformation to make these infrastructures and vehicles work in electrified, and also mobility as a service. So sharing approaches of vehicles and transport modes, and also intermodal services, connecting different modes of transport. So here we have growth opportunities, like some of them up to factor 10, so huge growth. And of course, then also societal benefits. And this is then really about what we call the Vision Zero. This session is called safety mainly. Of course, 0 accidents, 0 fatalities, probably not by 2025, because the penetration of these technologies takes a bit of time to roll this out, for example, in vehicles. But at the end, then we would have this vision of much less fatalities and 0 carbon emissions. That's then coming back to the efficiency that we can gain also by automation and, of course, the electrification. So these are the trends that we see. And this, of course, needs to be enabled by digital transformation. This is this twin transition that was mentioned also by the Executive Vice President this morning, digital and green. The investments that we're doing now, this should be going into digital, into green technologies, and this transformation. For that, we need private investment, of course. So really our stakeholders, our companies in Europe embracing these opportunities, and that's where we can help is also, of course, public funding. And that was then explained again this morning also by Piers O'Donoghue when he laid out a bit the recovery fund that we are now implementing with the member states. So what we basically need here is connectivity and data. Data to fuel the AI, and connectivity as a glue to connect everything together, to make all data available, not only the data that we already see today, mainly by sensors in the proximity of the vehicle or short range, but also, of course, the long range to the whole big data, the twin of the reality that whatever is useful for these kind of services. So there, of course, 5G comes in. The more we go to higher reliability and having more of this data available to make these decisions, we need, of course, more connectivity, and that was also well explained by Dimitri, that we need this updates regularly and also reliably. So yeah, then 2025, that's also a year where we have some targets in the 5G action plan. We want to have all cities and transport paths covered with 5G, and that will hopefully give a basis for these services to develop. So first services can develop by that time, and then higher levels of automation probably starting there. So we might see already some cars in the market that have some higher levels of automation, starting at around that time, and then being rolled out gradually towards 2030, where we expect then higher penetrations of these kind of advanced vehicles and infrastructure. So yeah, this target of 2025 is just saying, okay, we want 5G rolled out. We didn't specify so in detail what quality and what coverage. So this is, of course, key, especially when we talk about these critical services like connected automated mobility. And here, I think we have plenty of opportunities also to use the public funding, especially in areas where there's market failure, to go a step beyond what is required, for example, by coverage obligations, where we say, okay, you have to roll out 5G with some more basic quality indications, what needs to be done. And then here, we probably need a step change. We need to make these infrastructures really reliable enough to support these kind of critical services.
Peter.
And what we often hear, of course, is the business case that one say, okay, this is very expensive. And especially if we come from a vision, from a transport sector vision, that we need to roll this out for CAM or for safety services, then immediately one would say, okay, who pays that? That costs billions. That doesn't fly. So what we need here is an approach of cooperation, where we need this infrastructure also, and that's what 5G actually is about. We have a multi-service platform where we can, from day one, also have players that roll this out, but also monetize this infrastructure from the start. So we don't have to wait for these famous cars coming maybe 2025 that have some services that we don't know today, because we need to we can think about use cases today and then have some ideas, but of course what will come is then innovation. This will develop over the years, and we can't decide it today. That we always know in the mobile sector. We always knew that when we talk about killer applications in different generations. So we need to develop this infrastructure, this platform with a bit of uncertainty, but we of course know that we can already monetize this from day one, because all kinds of services from the next years on, and that was Dimitri was saying, and he started with a nice example, gaming. This is maybe not such a societal challenge that we address, and we have public policy objectives behind. But of course, everything that helps to make the business case and to pay for these infrastructures is good. And then we need, of course, some priorities that is clear, and we have network slicing as a technology that we, of course, when it's a matter of life and death, even if we need real time for the gaming, we know that, of course, the safety service should have priority.
Peter, thank you very much. We'll come back to the business case and the revenue streams and return on investments, hopefully later on in this discussion. I would like to pick it up with Ilka from a public regulatory perspective. Are we all set for that vision that Peter, Dimitri, and Artūrs explained over the next 5 years, or do we need to adjust, amend, or accelerate in policymaking and regulatory frameworks?
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you, Kasper, and thank you for the other panelists for making very good points already. I'm really glad to hear already all these ideas, and also, as I don't have my crystal ball in here, and we all know that the most greatest innovations are still to become, and part of these panelists who are sitting in here, they are the ones and their companies and industry who are making of these. But the answer to, Kasper, your question is that yes, we do need to adapt on the legislative matters as well. As a public authority member, of course, what I was also happy to hear in this comment is that we put on first the human well-being, that the human is there to center, and the technology adapts then for those human needs. And so, as a public authority on the legislative matters, of course, we look not only the human safety for traffic safety, for example, throughout the 5G, but to have a more sustainable, environmentally enhanced ecosystem for the traffic environment. And just for safety, one example, what could it be? It can be vulnerable road users and walking conditions in a road and interaction between the vehicles. These parts are really important. If we go look on the legislative side, we of course have to look on to have an open ecosystem that the data sharing is really enabled, and those kind of agreements can be done between the public and private entities. For example, the data for road safety in Europe has been a really good example of this. And of course, the environmental aspect on legislative matters are very important. I believe one of the questions in here when we're advancing to 5G and data sharing, then comes the AI discussion, what we are here for today, is then that how transparent are the algorithms there? Should we do some legislation and work together on those as well? So there are definitely many questions to how to share these responsibilities when aiming for the better vision for human.
Understood. And I guess that we share a lot of ambitions. We see a lot of opportunities, but also we see a lot of unknowns. What you all more or less stress is the point that we need to have a cooperation, a partnership, an ecosystem. Could I come back to Artūrs, how he sees his own position from Latvia Mobile Telecom in such a partnership? Who can you partner with? What do you expect from public authorities within and outside Latvia?
So actually, it's not so simple question, because of course we are partnering between public authorities, but not only. We are partnering with the academic sector as well, because they have a huge impact on the services, what we will be deployed in the future and how they will be tested somewhere in some fields, just to bring them safe for consumers and for businesses. So at the moment, what I can share, we have several projects here in Latvia where we are cooperating between road authorities, ministries, universities, etc. And we already are starting to test these services what will be in the future. So, for example, the car platonings, how we share these data, etc. But one question what I would like to raise, we have discussed separately that data, of course, is a king, etc. But how we get this data from the cars, and it's a main question. Of course, we can invest in the road infrastructure. We can implement some new AI services, devices, and so on. But to be honest, I don't see how we will gather data from the cars, which is one of the main sensors on the road. So if the car manufacturers in the future will be more open and share this data, I believe that we can move forward much faster and bring more simple services to our people and businesses as well.
That seems like a call to action for all member states and especially the European Commission to enhance data sovereignty and really make this an open ecosystem. And you touched upon the data for road safety as Ilka did as well. Peter, how far are we along with creating this open ecosystem for transparent data transfer and really reap the benefits of artificial intelligence? Because that does suppose a large volume, large quantity of data from a wide variety of sources.
Exactly, yeah. That's, of course, a priority for us. So when you looked at the data strategy that we had beginning of the year in February, that was like sector by sector approach to say that we have to create this, what we call data spaces, and also have a proper governance, actually, to have an agreement how data is shared. And this, the same as we do it also for the infrastructure investment, we need a multi-stakeholder approach. So we need to be very inclusive with the stakeholders. Artūrs said, okay, those that might have the data, we expect them maybe to share it. That's, of course, easy said. So we need to sit together and say, what is the win-win? What are the benefits for everyone to have these innovation ecosystems? And that works best usually when you also have some concrete examples. As I said before, we can't decide on the use cases. I mean, we can have some illustrations and some ideas, and this can probably help to convince everyone to work together and to say what kind of data we need. And it makes it also more concrete, because we say we create a data space and then we look, okay, what kind of data we can just collect. That's a bit vague. So we need to see a bit more concretely what we want to do as the first step, and then we can create this concept for the data space and also start discussing the sharing conditions where everyone then agrees to. So that's I think the idea, that we do sector by sector, not only for transfer but for also others. And you can imagine how difficult this is for health, and we saw just recently how important it can be for health. So all these, and then of course the opportunities that we have to come back in the big data space for Europe. So yeah, this is something that we're developing, and we hope that in the next few months come up with some ideas on the governance. Also, of course, agreed with the stakeholders that we will set out some approaches, and then start indeed creating these data spaces.
Thank you. Going to Dimitri, where do you see yourselves as NVIDIA in such a data space approach? You delivering all types of products, services, technologies to a wide variety of in the B2B sector. What would that mean for you?
Yeah, so actually, of course, our main goal is to provide all the necessary compute resources, regardless whether it's edge or data center, to process all this huge amount of data generated by different types of, let's say, smart agents. Doesn't matter whether it's people or automated cars or robots or stuff like this. But one important point I would like to make, and thanks, Peter, for making this bridge from autonomous cars towards healthcare, Actually, one of the technology we are already offering on the market is called transfer learning. So this is the technology which allows you, while keeping the privacy of data and let's say training your model using some end customer data, to share only the results of this training. So basically you provide back to the community the kind of outcomes of this data without sharing the data itself and securing the personal data, while other parts of this community or ecosystem can basically add their insights on top of already made things. So, and that gives basically ability to enrich the findings made by each party without actually sharing the personal or sensitive data between the parties itself. So I think it's one of the technological approach which we develop on our side to address these issues.
Very interesting. Ilkka, from a legislative and regulatory point of view, how do you see from the Finnish perspective the balance between, on one side, corporation and ecosystems, and on the other side, competition and innovation and fair market development? Because that could be a potential dilemma, but maybe you have a very practical solution.
Yeah, that's a tough question indeed. Of course, if you see how would we see as a public authority in the whole value chain and in the ecosystem, of course, the public data is mostly shared as an open data already, and hopefully more will be shared. Some of the words from the industry, of course, have been heard as well, that is the quality there enough? It's not just enough always to share it. If there's really need, you need to enhance the quality of the data as well. So the Open Data Directive also regulates us to share it. And for using the example of the data for road safety example, where the public and private authorities with the OEMs and the service providers are sharing the data, there has to be a common agreement when is the data then shared, because any data that the public authorities receive, they have to share it forward. So this also includes the private industry data. So there has to be an agreement where it goes the line between what data can be shared. And I'm also really glad, and in this context, Dimitri mentioned here the data privacy, which is in especially new kind of cloud platforms or neutral servers, which are really distributed servers, and which 5G will develop even more. And so how in this new kind of ecosystem where data is shared in several sources, how the data privacy is ensured, and how we can protect the private citizens as well. And this includes, of course, the whole cybersecurity scheme of security as well.
In summary, all of you stress the importance of the non-technical conditions, whether being it data protection, privacy, cybersecurity, governance, business rules when it comes to data spaces and ecosystems. Are we taking the right steps to really come to that next level of preparing and actually deploying those services and getting that ecosystem and those partnerships going? Is that clear and workable for everybody at this point in time, or are we still preparing to get there? I know this market is developing rapidly, and both member states and the European Commission are very much targeted to really step up our efforts, competing with Asia and others in the world. Then again, we're still talking about it as a dream and as a necessity. But what do we need to do ourselves, and what can we do in the next 12 months to get there?
Gaspar, if you want, I can say just a few words. Also from the example on the infrastructure side, I'm of course more in the 5G infrastructure policy, where we have this process of the strategic deployment agenda, where we have the common vision, how these infrastructures can be rolled out without picking a business model, but already touching about some cooperation models, so how different models could be. And that's, of course, a good basis, but then it's not enough to really get going with the actual projects. And there we have now the CEF program coming up, this Connecting Europe facility, where we now put together, and then some by corridor, this is done to really look how does the corridor look like, who wants to be on board, what will be the usage model, and so on. So that's just as an illustration also for the data part, to have already some ideas on the governance, on the principles, but then get going with concrete projects. And by that, I think we will also learn and see how what will be the setup, what we need. And then, of course, we can revisit this deployment agenda, or then, of course, the governance arrangements by the specifics, and then adjust and move to the next round. That's, I think we should approach it quite pragmatically.
Well, I heard an interesting suggestion last week that suppose that we need more regulation-free zones. We need more sandboxes. We need more ample opportunity to experiment, accept that we may fail in the first stages, but that we really put it out there in reality and get it going. To Artūrs and Ilkka, would that be helpful to you and also be feasible from a public perspective?
If I start shortly, like we say in Finland, not sandboxes, but snowboxes. So we definitely need more those with the public-private collaboration to do the trials, and because that's the only way to learn. And the ecosystems and the technical solutions, they are really complex, and they, as said, then can be real big game changers via 5G. And of course, there are existing ecosystems, as we already mentioned, few examples that can also give us some guidance and help them to step up for the 5G game. But like I said, yes, definitely, we need those trials together with the industry.
And did you hear from the industry any comments that current regulation is hindering that experimentation opportunity, or is it just, well, there's nothing in your way and really get going?
Yeah, I think it's really case matter on depends on what kind of trials you are doing. But yes, of course, there are time to time those words as well. For example, the data privacy is a good example, as the platforms are completely different, and how the data are shared between several partners. That completely changes when the data is anonymized, when it's pseudonymized, when can the private information be extracted there, and it's a really difficult question. So you need a lot of statistical methods and trials to really look onto those. So yes, they are open questions.
Okay. Artūrs, you can choose between a sandbox and a snowbox.
It will be in the middle then, because we are in the Baltic state. But I think, in my opinion, technology is not the issue at the moment. The 5G network, for example, in Latvia is already deployed, and we have several base stations, several cities, and so on. But the big question is legislation, for sure. Because, for example, if we would like to test in these snow sandboxes some connected or automated car services, then it's quite impossible, because legislation is not ready for this. And in my opinion, we are a little bit slow with it, and we should move forward much faster, because when the 5G will be deployed on the main roads, etc., so then we will start to think how these connected cars will drive on these roads. No, we should think about it already today.
Okay. Dimitri, would NVIDIA be really helped to get a more relaxed regulation or certain conditions on a smaller scale? Would you find that very helpful to accelerate your own development and deployments?
Yeah, I would. Once again, we are more from a technological side. So I would probably just stress one thing, that such a foundational technologies like 5G and like availability of AI tools and applications and development tools are basically the democratizing the access to these technologies to the wide variety of different companies and startups. And I think the important thing that today we probably even cannot imagine what use cases will come up once these technologies get widely deployed. So once infrastructure is here, we can expect there will be multiple new killer applications in the field which we cannot even imagine at the moment, like, I don't know, like AR and VR, which will be widely available and wouldn't require any special type of connectivities. So I believe that, and probably one more comment, you know, that technology is always faster than the legislation. And I don't really think that we need to make this in reverse order. So let the technological companies develop the technologies and the policy makers to just do the policies to make these technologies, let's say, safe and equally available for everyone.
That really begs a response from Peter, from the European Commission's perspective. Legislation, step up the efforts. We're slow in adapting to new technologies and deployment of technologies.
Yeah, I think, of course, we always, when we do legislation, we don't want to somehow stifle innovation. That's, of course, a very important principle. And when you look at what happens now with the platforms, we were doing a number of things in the platform field, and then we know the e-commerce directive is, of course, already some time ago. So now it's time to look at the principles of the Digital Services Act that we're now designing, just as an example. And of course, it's always a matter of setting a framework where then technologies can flourish. And of course, in the data area, this is, of course, very tricky, as the different panelists here outlined. So we didn't come up yet with a clear position to say this has to be shared under these conditions, and it's also very sector specific in many cases, and that probably wouldn't work also in light of these developments. As Dimitri just said, we don't know what is coming. So in that sense, we now went to this approach to say we work on this governance and try to have this work with stakeholders. And then we can always see if things are really concrete and we have blocking situations, what we can do. But in the moment, that's not the idea to legislate the data access in this detail.
That leaves the risk or the pitfall that all 27 member states will eventually come up with their own legislation or not, leaving a lot of uncertainty and a lot of obstacles for a full-scale deployment in a rapid progression over the next couple of years. But I gather from your comment, Peter, that the Commission will not put forward some sort of minimal legislation when it comes to, for instance, automated driving and safety on roads for the use of artificial intelligence, safeguarding the basic societal values and conditions. Is that correct, my assumption?
Yeah, this is at least not scheduled in the concrete work programs. Okay. But of course, this can move rather fast. I can't give you any guarantee that what will come in the next years. And I think if we see that really things are not moving, or we need to also set some frameworks in light of the different approaches of member states, we can, of course, act rather fast. But at the moment, there's nothing concrete planned as a legislative proposal in this area.
So that leaves it up to Finland, Latvia, and the Netherlands to come up with a proposition or a corporation, which is fine by me, so to speak. I think that you've touched upon some very valuable points, especially the conditions under which we could proceed, the difference in speed when it comes to rapid technology development and the more glacial space of legislation and regulation taking place, and the need to have both cooperation and ecosystems in place under transparent governance rules and stipulations, with a very clear vision when it comes where it pertains to building ecosystems and partnerships, either on a European scale or different member states or clusters from different companies within that value chain. Excellent points. Then again, we could also conclude we have our work cut out for us over the next couple of years, because it will not happen without our own efforts. Would you concede in that conclusion? I see you nodding. Yes, we got to do it ourselves, guys. And all of the audience participating in this session. I have a clock in my screen that says 4 times 0. I assume that our moderator on the stage wants to address several questions or topics put forward by the audience.
There are some questions. And by the way, we asked the audience their opinion about which is the role of artificial intelligence in smart mobility. And the most popular answers were dynamic traffic monitoring and increased safety on roads. And regarding safety on roads, there's a question to Artūrs. As Europe has set target of reducing deaths on roads by 50% in 10 years by 2030, how important does the technology play in this, to achieve this goal? And is it possible to achieve it at all without 5G?
So I believe the technologies will help for sure. And if we look back, then Europe already had such a target till 2020 to reduce these fatalities till 2020. It wasn't done, and so now is new target till 2030. And what we are doing now in Latvia and LMT, we are not only the telco, but we are researching and developing such systems as well based on artificial intelligence, and which are like traffic monitoring system, red light enforcement system, and so on. And we see that actually the driver habits are that they're driving on red, and such technologies can just help to reach this target to 2030, and I believe much faster. What I said already previously, that we can do it in 4G already, but 4G is best effort network, and we can deliver these services, but to scale these services, we need 5G.
Yes, there's a question by Joanna, quite an interesting one. So the question goes like, in driverless cars, are you also monitoring weather patterns? And she mentions that there could be possible problems with some kind of one-off severe weather event that has not happened in the past in that particular area. So would those sensors and technologies cope with that kind of scenario?
Yeah, let me take on this. So actually the approach to deal with such a unique situations is actually through the simulation. And the simulation basically give us the opportunity to simulate any type of very rare events in virtual world, if you will, and then basically transfer this knowledge to the all connected cars across the globe. So we can even simulate, let's say, heavy snow in Africa. It doesn't really matter where, but the thing is that all this data will be transparent and technically available to any connected cars. So this would let deal with these situations in real world.
Okay, thank you for that. There are a few more questions. Just please answer them later in written form in the system. By the way, we have our artist Dace here in the room, and she was drawing all the time. And let us see the result. Oh, that is beautiful. We see all the speakers. Oh, gaming, public security vehicles. Yeah, future. Maybe we need regulation, free zones, sandboxes and stuff. So that is you guys. Thank you so much for joining this panel with us today.
Thank you to all my guests and colleagues and spectators. Thank you very much. Have a great conference.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. We are back in about 5 minutes, and we will continue with the use case. And it is also going to be about smart mobility. So see you in 5 minutes.
Quick question.
We are the Riga Freeport, the one that borders the European Union and Russia. The world may have seen bigger ports, but when it comes to quality, whether it be our team, technology, or logistics, not many ports have the same standards as we do. We will be glad to work with you and support you in developing infrastructure. We will meet and guide your ships to the pier, and we will send them to their next destination. Riga Freeport. Big in business, big in quality.
Over the horizon, in what is tomorrow, lies the unknown. Applications we can't imagine today will change the way we live and suddenly become the norm. 5G is the path forward. However, it requires a staggering investment that means missteps aren't an option. Cisco provides the most important pieces of that investment: a flexible software-based service creation platform, security, and automation. Pay-as-you-grow licensing removes the risk in your journey to 5G and gives you the agility to move quickly. With a proven, open, and cloud-native architecture designed for now and the future, you get best-in-class network scaling that is simple and automated. proprietary barriers disappear and new revenue opportunities open. Services can be deployed when and where customers need them. Only Cisco provides innovative technology leadership that spans network operators, enterprises, the public sector, IoT, and web providers, bringing the expertise and security to support you every step of the way. With a flexible cloud-to-client approach, you can be ready to provide the unimagined. Between the needs of today and the trajectory of tomorrow, there's a bridge. Cisco, the bridge to possible.